What exactly happened here? Why did Fairfax change its mind on taking over the company?
Well, I think what we learned on Friday essentially became an inescapable truth that Fairfax did not have the money it needed to buy the company lock, stock, and take it private. So instead, what we have is some nifty financial transaction in which there's a $1 billion convertible debenture that investors can choose to buy into. The question I have, and I have for other analysts with this news so fresh, is why does a company that had at least $2.5 billion in cash at the end of last quarter need to raise another $1 billion? And the only thing I can think off the top of my head is that this new CEO came in, John Chen, executive director, from Sybase, and said two conditions. First, we need to change the CEO, and second, I want some money to play with in the form of a debenture.
That's interesting. All right, well, let me turn to Christina here, who has been digging into some of the background on John Chen. He's the former chairman and CEO of Sybase, and he's now going to be the interim CEO replacing Heins. What do we know about him?
Well, it's interesting. This guy is basically known as a connector in the tech world between Western companies and Chinese companies. And in fact, he's a senior advisor at Silver Lake. Silver Lake, of course, has nothing to do with this deal, is not interested in participating at all. But he does serve on the boards of two Silver Lake companies, one Chinese company. He also, very broadly speaking, is a well-respected business leader. He sits on the boards of both Wells Fargo and Disney, and he has no interest, from what I'm being told, in becoming a permanent CEO. He wants to go out and find a world-class CEO. You mentioned Sybase. What I'm hearing from some tech executives is that he's widely credited with turning that company around. It had its own existential issues, and he was seen as a change agent there. So what the board is hoping is that he'll do the same thing at BlackBerry. And to Hugo's point, he kind of saw the fact of the matter is that operating income was dropping off of a cliff. Although the company was successful in keeping overall cash pretty much stable over the last couple of years, its operating income was really falling off of a cliff. So he needed the money to really turn things around.
Christina, let me just interrupt you for a moment, because this is another subject you know a lot about. A headline just coming out that Twitter has boosted their price range.
Wow.
You and I just talked about this. Okay, $23 to $25. Remember, we had mentioned that it was $17 to $20. So $23 to $25. Are you surprised?
I am a little bit, because this was sort of the anti-Facebook offering. So you would think that if they really wanted to go against the grain on Facebook, they would have
undervalued a little bit. Yeah.
Conservative stance. Now we see a valuation that's pretty much in line with the tech company comparables out there, and a lot of investors are saying, look, we're in a frothy tech market, and to price comparably to some of the hyped up tech names perhaps is a little aggressive and not particularly characteristic up until this point with what we've seen out of Twitter management. But clearly they think, they've got a tremendous amount of demand, and look, they may even price at the top end of the range. It's going to be really bad for them, however, if they come in on the lower end of the range after,
that would seem they would have misfired then at that point.
Totally misjudged.
Okay, Hugo, let me get back to BlackBerry with you. And Christina raised a good point about John Chen's connections to companies in China. Do the Canadians, are they against seeing a BlackBerry sold to perhaps a Lenovo or a Chinese company?
I think they are. Even if a Lenovo or someone else that John Chen can act as a kind of conduit between is interested, we have indications, straight from the Prime Minister that a Chinese bid is just not going to be welcome. Perhaps the situation would change if we're talking about not the whole company, but parts of the company. But ultimately, the parts of the company that people want are the sensitive parts, the patents that also have relevance to the security of the devices, and then also the enterprise business, which is so critical to institutions like the Pentagon and NATO. Yeah. So I just think it would be very, very tough for a Chinese company to come in and buy parts or the remaining.
What would they want?
That is BlackBerry.
But Hugo, what would they want? Let's say a Chinese company came in. What would be the most valuable? What would they want?
So let's say we've got a company like Lenovo. They make smartphones. They don't yet have the traction they'd like in the U.S. market. What does BlackBerry give them? It gives them an immediate entree to some of the most serious, respected consumers in the world, business users, lawyers, government contracts. And it's for exactly that reason that not just Ottawa, but I think regulators in Washington would very quickly say, no, it's just not a starter here. We cannot have those kinds of networks being operated by companies. Even if Lenovo doesn't fall into the category of Huawei, which is seen with a lot of suspicion, it's just I think a bridge too far for the governments of the two countries.
All right, Hugh.
And then, sorry, to answer your question, what else would they want? Patents would be the other obvious appeal, a treasure trove of patents.